My earliest childhood memories begin at the White Mansion on Brattle Street. It was the early 1990s, in the wealthy suburbs of Cambridge, Massachusetts. The street was lined with old money families, and we, the Mitchells, were among them. My father William ran the city's most prestigious law firm, and my mother Catherine was a brilliant socialite and philanthropist who had graduated from an elite university. Our neighbors referred to us as the perfect upper-class family. We attended church on Sundays, Mother hosted monthly charity galas, and Father frequently appeared in newspapers as a prominent figure in the legal community. But the truth was different. Behind those heavy front doors, another face lurked. Late at night, angry voices would leak from Father's study. Martha, our housekeeper, whispered to me that they were gambling debt collectors. $2 million, she said. At 8 years old, I couldn't grasp the magnitude of that sum. Mother was a perfectionist. Always dressed in the latest designer brands, hosting lavish parties, and the payments for these extravagances pushed Father further into desperation. At home, the atmosphere would shift with Mother's moods. When something displeased her, plates would fly and shouts would echo. In all of this, my only refuge was the kitchen. I'd heard that my grandmother Mary had been an excellent cook. Though she passed away when I was 4, her recipe book remains my treasure to this day. Martha, our housekeeper, secretly taught me how to cook. Young miss, watch how to whip these eggs just so. Yes, Martha. The kitchen was warm, bathed in gentle light. But Mother strongly disapproved of my interest in cooking. Cooking is for the lower classes. You're a Mitchell lady. I was a top student at school, but even that wasn't appreciated at home. Mother's constant refrain was, "You're our shame." Father called me a disgrace to the Mitchell name. I can't remember ever feeling loved. Catering and takeout were the norm. I never saw Mother cook. As the belle of society, she considered it beneath her to stand in a kitchen. I secretly dreamed of making someone happy with food I'd prepared myself. I held on to that small dream. Then came that fateful day. It was an unusually cold evening in late October. I was in the kitchen with Martha, baking cinnamon cookies, when suddenly angry shouts erupted from Father's study. The second-floor study, usually his quiet workspace filled with heavy furniture, had become something else entirely. Mitchell. The deadline's passed. I won't wait any longer. Just one more week. I'll pay it back. I promise. Next time I'm bringing the police. You know what's at stake. Heavy footsteps and a door slamming violently. Martha gently embraced my shoulders. Her hands, those of a housekeeper of 20 years, provided comfort. The vanilla and cinnamon scents wafting through the kitchen suddenly turned tense. Miss, you'd better read in your room tonight. Here, take these. She handed me warm milk and cookies that were still slightly warm. But I had important preparations for tomorrow, Mother's annual grand charity gala. I had secretly planned to serve my cookies. Surely everyone will love them, I thought. Little did I know what a grave mistake that would be. That night, I stopped in my tracks at the voices leaking from my parents' bedroom. This is the limit, William. Your gambling has drained our savings. I know. But this next race is a sure thing. I'll win it all back. That's what you always say. There must be another way. The next morning, at the Charles Hotel's banquet room in Harvard Square, Mother greeted guests one after another, dressed in her latest Chanel suit, her pearl necklace gleaming elegantly. It was a fundraiser for the Boston Museum of Art's new children's program. Society's elite arrived one by one in their luxury cars at the hotel's main entrance. I quietly opened the door, carrying my homemade cookies. On the silver tray lay heart-shaped cookies I had carefully baked following grandmother's recipe. Ladies and gentlemen, these are today's. That's when it happened. Mother's thin fingers cut through the air, striking my right cheek hard. The party fell silent. The silver tray crashed onto the marble floor, cookies shattering pathetically. I heard Mrs. Chelsea's sharp intake of breath. "You useless, shameless child. Who told you you could do this? How dare you serve such vulgar things?" Mother's voice echoed through the high-ceilinged banquet room. Her socialite lady's mask had fallen away in an instant. The guests awkwardly averted their eyes, while Father was at the distant bar counter, already tilting a heavy whiskey glass in the middle of the day. My cheek burned with pain. But my heart hurt even more. Looking at the scattered cookies on the floor, I remembered grandmother's gentle smile. That afternoon, when we returned to our grand mansion, an unfamiliar middle-aged man in a suit was waiting in the reception room. Gray suit, blue tie, a law firm badge gleaming. "Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, I have important news regarding your daughter. We've made a new discovery about Mary's will." I listened, holding my breath, hidden behind the staircase. Grandmother had left me an inheritance. I would inherit her entire estate when I turned 21. My parents' expressions gradually hardened. Father's hands trembled, and Mother's lips pressed into a thin line. The next afternoon, Father smiled unusually kindly and invited me for a drive. He said he'd buy me a new book. Mother came too. The car took unfamiliar roads and eventually arrived at an old wooden bridge on the outskirts of town. It spanned a tributary of the Charles River, a deserted spot. The red-painted railing was peeling and weathered. "Let's look at the view for a moment." Father's voice trembled slightly. The evening sky was beginning to turn red. We stopped in the middle of the bridge. The October wind coldly caressed my cheeks. "Amy. I'm sorry, but this is the only way." Father's large hand pushed against my back. Mother watched with cold eyes. She turned up her expensive coat collar and looked away. In that moment, strangely, my heart was calm. More than fear, a deep sadness filled my chest. Looking up at the sky over the bridge railing, I saw clouds tinged with sunset. Orange light reflected on the water's surface. Suddenly, I remembered the scent of grandmother's apple pie. The warm kitchen. Her gentle voice. Memories of lost happiness. Ah, my dream will never come true. The moment I thought this, my body floated in the air, falling through the cold wind. Everything moved in slow motion. The sky reflected on the water's surface was as vivid as an impressionist painting. My red coat fluttered in the wind. The last thing I heard was Mother's cold voice from the bridge. "Come, let's go." No one saw. Cold water enveloped me. But strangely, I wasn't afraid. Rather, I felt liberated from all my burdens. As consciousness faded, the sunset light piercing the water's surface shone beautifully, like a gateway to heaven. This scene would appear in my dreams many times afterward. And then my life changed dramatically, in ways neither I nor anyone else could have predicted. As consciousness slipped away in the cold water, I suddenly heard splashing sounds and voices. Grace! Shine the flashlight here. There, David. I see a red coat. Large hands grabbed me, pulling me up from the water. Though my consciousness was hazy, I remember the sensation of being wrapped in a warm blanket and a kind woman's voice. Poor thing. She's freezing. David, hurry to Mount Auburn Hospital. When I opened my eyes, I was in a stark white hospital room. David Reynolds, a large man with kind eyes, was reading a book by my bedside. Hey, you're awake. Grace, she's up. Turning at his voice was his wife Grace, wearing a warm smile. She held a thermos of homemade soup. Did you sleep well? I brought my special chicken soup. The couple who saved me had unexpected backgrounds. David was formerly a 3-star chef in Paris, now running a small bistro called Le Petit Jardin in Cambridge. Grace had a career as a top pastry chef and now teaches baking at Bunker Hill Community College. Amy, we found this in your coat pocket. Grace held out a wrinkled, wet piece of paper. It was grandmother's apple pie recipe. 2 months of hospitalization followed. My parents vanished, and the police tried to treat it as an unfortunate accident. But the Reynolds visited my hospital room daily, encouraging me with talks about cooking. Grace, look at her eyes. They hold a passion for cooking. Yes, David. I can see it too. I later learned they had struggled with infertility for years. Teaching cooking to children who came to their bistro had helped ease that loneliness. As my discharge approached, they made an important decision. After meeting with the Massachusetts Department of Children and Families, they submitted adoption papers. Amy, if you'd like, would you become our daughter? David's voice trembled slightly. Grace held my hand with tears in her eyes. Let's cook together. Let us nurture your talent. Outside the window, spring sunlight warmly illuminated Boston's cityscape. It was a gentle light that hinted at the beginning of a new life. This was the start of my second life. Though we weren't related by blood, I had found my true family. New bonds were being formed through cooking. Life with the Reynolds family was like a different world entirely. Every morning at 5 a.m., I'd wake to David's bonjour. Outside the window, Cambridge's streets were still dark, wrapped in the purplish light of pre-dawn. Well, another day begins. Didn't forget your apron, did you? Every morning before starting prep at the bistro, David would always brew me a cup of fragrant coffee in a French press. The citrus notes amid the bitterness marked the beginning of my day. Amy, let's start with how to hold a knife. Basics are crucial. Watch how to grip it. Hold the base of the blade between your thumb and forefinger. David was a patient teacher. He had me practice mincing onions countless times and taught me how to make bouillon from scratch. Le Petit Jardin's small kitchen became my classroom. Fresh ingredients always lined the stainless steel sink, and copper pots gleamed in the morning sun. Sauce is the soul of cooking. Today we'll start with bechamel. Smell the butter and flour. This toasty aroma tells you the heat is just right. Weekend afternoons were Grace's lessons. In Bunker Hill Community College's pastry kitchen, she taught me everything from basics to advanced techniques. The practice kitchen, lined with new ovens, was always filled with sweet aromas. Learn to feel the temperature of the dough with your hands. A pastry chef is also a scientist. Just 1 degree difference in butter temperature can completely change the texture. Grace's instruction was precise and delicate. Folding croissant dough into multiple layers, carefully checking macaron temperatures. Her skills were honed in Paris's finest pâtisseries. At 12, I was allowed to put my own dessert menu item at the bistro for the first time. Amy's apple tart tatin was grandmother's recipe evolved through Grace's techniques. The elegantly caramelized apples refined sweetness and crispy pastry. When the Boston Globe's food critic praised it as a masterful fusion of tradition and innovation, I was moved to tears. By 15, I entered the National Junior Chef competition. In the regional preliminaries, I captivated the judges with homemade à l'américaine using fresh lobster. In the finals, I presented a modern bouillabaisse, a fusion of local seafood and traditional French cooking methods. When I won, David shed large tears, and Grace held me tight. You're our pride, Amy. In high school, a new challenge began, establishing the cooking club. It started with just 3 members. We borrowed the home economics room and experimented with new recipes after school. Soon, word spread, and within a year, we had over 20 members. Catering for charity events became an important club activity. Christmas dinner at the local homeless shelter, standing buffets for cancer patient support charity auctions. Making people happy through food, it was what I had dreamed of since childhood. Amid these fulfilling days, a fateful encounter occurred. Sarah Parker, an elegant woman in her 60s and an old friend of the Reynolds. I vividly remember the day we first met. Dressed in a Chanel tweed suit with a pearl necklace, she appeared at the bistro. "So, you're the Amy I've heard about." Sarah took one bite of my madeleines and showed a nostalgic expression. "Just like Mary's taste. That delicate lemon fragrance, just a touch of orange peel." Surprised by her words, I looked up. She knew grandmother's recipe. Actually, by this time, David and Grace had already realized who I was. The techniques I used in cooking, especially in desserts, matched those of my grandmother, their former regular customer, exactly. They had chosen to watch silently, wanting me to find my own path through my own strength. As time passed, Sarah increasingly supported me. When I wanted to start a cooking club at school, she negotiated with the administration. When new cooking equipment was needed, she quietly provided it. When we were trusted with catering charity events, she supported us behind the scenes. You have a special talent. You should develop it further. Have you considered training in France? Then, one rainy afternoon after the bistro closed, Sarah made an important confession. "Actually, I was your grandmother Mary's best friend. We were close for 40 years. She took out an old photograph. It showed a young grandmother and Sarah, smiling at a Paris cafe. Mary knew of your talent. That's why she left the inheritance for your future. I've been planning for 20 years to protect her wishes. But why until now? I was waiting for the right time. I wanted to see you nurture your passion for cooking through your own strength. Sarah's support continued, and my dreams gradually took shape. Warm days with the Reynolds family. Grandmother's wishes. Sarah's support. Everything was building my future. Daily ingredient sourcing, new menu development, conversations with customers, each experience became irreplaceable. Every day, I was absorbed in planning the next day's special menu. What dish could I create with fresh scallops and seasonal vegetables? David and Grace proudly watched over me as I worked in the kitchen. It was autumn of my second year of high school, when I was 17. That day too, David and Grace had gone to the farmer's market early in the morning. Unusually, they went together. Amy, we'll prepare a special dinner tonight. Let's think about new menu items for the 30th anniversary party. Grace's last smile remains burned in my memory. The phone call came 2 hours later. From Mass General Hospital. A collision with a large truck. Terror enveloped my entire body, feeling like my heart would stop. Am I losing my family again? When I rushed to the hospital, it was already too late. They said both died instantly. The reality of losing my beloved adoptive parents in an instant threatened to crush me. But it was different from when I was 8. This time, I had many warm memories. Memories of love supported me. After the funeral, Sarah became my support. Don't close Le Petit Jardin. No, but I want you to follow your own path in a new place. At Sarah's suggestion, I decided to study at a prestigious culinary school in France. The $5 million trust fund grandmother left. The inheritance rights I would receive at 21. And the Reynolds life insurance. Everything became a signpost toward my dream. Study in Paris. Then when you return, create your own restaurant. Even in my grief, new hope was visible. Carrying everything David and Grace taught me in my heart, I decided to look forward. After all, their love would live on forever within me. After completing my training in Paris at 28, I opened Le Jardin in Boston's Beacon Hill district. The location was a 19th century brownstone facing the street where I used to walk with my family. The red brick exterior and elegant latticed windows symbolized the harmony of tradition and innovation. Renovating the old building took over a year, preserving the classical facade while equipping the interior with the latest facilities. The restaurant's interior was scattered with memories of David and Grace. At the entrance, the brass sign from Le Petit Jardin. The aged lettering reflects warm light, having gained a deep patina over time. In the wine cellar, David's cherished vintage wines. A 1982 Bordeaux discovered at a small French farm is now worth over 100 times its original value. Grace's beloved copper molds decorate the dessert counter, and the patisserie corner features desserts based on her recipes. On the main dining room wall hangs Grandmother Mary's watercolor. The painting of a Paris cafe scene had been carefully preserved by Sarah. Every element expresses gratitude and respect for the people who shaped my life. 3 years after opening. A Michelin star earned, reservation 6 months out. The New York Times acclaimed Le Jardin as a new horizon in traditional French cuisine, while the Boston Globe ran a feature titled A Temple of Gastronomy Woven from the Story of a Lost Family. My signature dish, homage à David, is based on my adoptive father's teachings with a contemporary interpretation. The main ingredient, Maine lobster, was his beloved ingredient. The sauce uses bouillon made with his direct techniques. The dessert menu's Grace's Memory is an arrangement of her tart tatin. Using pears instead of apples and caramelizing with maple syrup, a modern approach. Every night as I make this dessert, I remember her gentle smile. It was a Friday evening like any other. In the full restaurant, I was directing service from the kitchen. While putting final touches on each plate, the seared foie gras, the blanquette of veal, showing synchronized movements with my staff. Warm up the sauce for table 3 a bit more. Hurry with the garnish for table 5. Then Thomas, the head waiter, rushed over with an unusually tense expression. "Chef, please look at table 7. From the glass-walled kitchen, I turned my gaze to the dining room. In that moment, time seemed to stop. My parents, whom I hadn't seen in 20 years. Father William's hair had turned white, his shoulders slightly hunched. His once perfect posture now slightly stooped. Mother Catherine's face was deeply lined, her former beauty subdued. They had probably come as society regulars to visit the talked-about restaurant. My hands trembled. Even when hot sauce dripped on the back of my hand, I couldn't feel the pain. My throat went dry, my vision distorted. The memory from when I was 8 flashed vividly. The cold wind, the view from the bridge, the sunset reflected on the water's surface. "Chef, are you all right?" Marcus, my sous chef, asked worriedly. "Yes, no problem." I took a deep breath. "Chef, the guests at table 7 would like to meet the owner." After composing myself, I left the kitchen. My white chef's coat gleamed in the chandelier light. Different from the red coat I wore 20 years ago on that bridge. I'm no longer the helpless child who could be pushed off a bridge. I'm the owner-chef of a fine restaurant. A respected culinary artist. My heels echoed on the marble floor. Just 15 steps to my parents' table. Each step contained 20 years of time. I am the owner. Silence enveloped the restaurant. Father's knife scraped his plate. Mother's wine glass, filled with $1,000 Chateau Lafite, slipped from her hand, the deep red liquid staining the white tablecloth. Like my blood from 20 years ago. "Amy." Mother's voice trembled. Father's face turned pale. I straightened my back and looked down at them with the same cold gaze they once directed at me. Yes, their daughter who was pushed from the bridge that day. Remember. The wooden bridge over the Charles River tributary. At dusk. In a deserted spot. Conversation in the restaurant stopped. Whispers from neighboring tables. I continued. Welcome. Tonight's special menu is Revenge à la Maison, home-style revenge. Savor it slowly. I've prepared something special for dessert. My parents' expressions twisted with fear. Now they were experiencing the terror I felt 20 years ago. And this was just the beginning of the end. The evidence Sarah had gathered over 20 years had been waiting for this moment. I smiled gracefully. Take your time. It's going to be a special evening. That night's events would send shockwaves through Boston society. The police arrived at Le Jardin about an hour after my reunion with my parents. Sarah had prepared for this moment for 20 years. The evidence she produced perfectly proved my parents' crimes. From the truth about grandmother Mary's death to the plan to murder me, everything came to light. William Mitchell, Catherine Mitchell. You are under arrest for attempted murder. Father showed no resistance, just hung his head. Mother became hysterical, crying out, I had nothing to do with it, it was all his idea. The elegant socialite Belle was no longer there. The next day, the Boston Globe's front page headline read, Le Jardin owner chef's shocking past, 20-year-old attempted murder by successful business couple revealed. It became a scandal that shook society. Planned crime targeting Mary Mitchell's inheritance. Couple pushed their own daughter from bridge. $2 million gambling debt suspected as motive. The media reported on this case day after day. But I chose a different path. Amy, we need your testimony. I told everything to the police investigation. But I didn't utter a single word of hatred. I am already happy enough. I was blessed with a true family in David and Grace, and Sarah, and I was able to fulfill my dreams. That's enough. At the trial, my parents were sentenced to 10 years in prison. But my life was looking forward. Le Jardin earned 2 Michelin stars. Reservations became a year-long wait. I also began teaching at Culinary school. I share with future chefs the possibilities of love and healing through food. The sparkle in my students' eyes reminds me of myself from years ago. Sarah still comes to the restaurant every Friday. She is my new family and a precious link to grandmother Mary. Mary would be so proud. I nodded at her words. Le Jardin's menu still features 3 special dishes. Homage to David, Grace's memory, and Mary's legacy. Each dish contains my gratitude to those who raised me. Every day, various people visit the restaurant. Family celebrations, reunions with friends, important promises. Now I feel the joy of being able to be part of special moments in people's lives through my cooking. This is the true revenge. The best way to repay the kindness of those I loved. I practice daily the words David and Grace left me. Cooking is love. Nothing more, nothing less. Outside the window, spring sunlight fell on Boston streets, as a new season was about to begin.